how does a human being discern whether they're being fooled? And maybe that...
It comes to your heart's awareness and how in line your mind and your heart are.
So is it how I feel about it?
It's not feel. When you experience consciousness through your heart and not through your brain, it's an indescribable separation where there is no separation before. You have separation, we have the separation of worlds. Your heart and your mind are separate until you learn the consciousness techniques to make them one and the same.
So they work together.
In synchronicity.
Synchronicity. So there is the mental aspect of organizing the data, and then there's that vibrational piece where you're feeling, do I have everything in order?
And adjust the data to match it.
Adjust the data. So we call that in my work data massaging.
Yep.
And there's an art form, right?
Yep.
You're trying to distill the complex into the simple.
Correct.
So your heart is doing that intuitively.
Correct.
And your mind is like trying to keep track, but at some point the complexity exceeds the mind's ability.
Correct.
Hence the heart, in fact, is probably the supermind, because it actually can take the infinity and break it down into
finite pieces that are decipherable and digestible.
In terms of a feeling of, is that right?
That's just about right. I mean,
yeah, just about.
I mean,
but an approximation, you're close.
You're really close. I mean, it's very, very good that you described it that way. I mean, what I have to add to that, the heart itself is where your soul originated from. When you're a fetus, you start out as a heart with a brain inside the heart. There's actually a piece of brain matter inside your heart.
Heart.
Like the actual heart. Like when you watch a fetus grow, it is a heart with a brain and a beginning spinal column. And then as the heart grows, the skeleton grows out, and the spine grows up and makes a brain. So the brain isn't formed until weeks later, but the heart's there first. There's an actual brain in the heart. So when you reach consciousness exploration and realize that this brain, its energy center, is projected from the heart, everything goes into the ladder of the heart. And therefore, the heart can experience the no time while the brain's still functioning with the data.
In this piece.
Right.
So can you see that?
I can physically see that in streams in front of people.
The next layer. I've spoken about this concept many times, the giveaway. It's when we choose to release that which is negative, when we choose to release that which holds us back and doesn't allow us our full expression. There are times that we give away things to others so they may heal. There are times we give away knowledge and wisdom for free simply because we want to share that knowledge and wisdom. But attached to that knowledge and wisdom is the absolute inner hope that people will use their own personal discernment, their own personal layers of understanding the patterns of life, so they may co-create with it and expand the concept so it takes on the infinite instead of the finite that we're stuck in. You know, some of these concepts are hard for people to understand, but that's all right. We're at the very dawn of a new age, and it is us that are the consciousness explorers of peace that will help define that, so the future generations that come into this world and come into their empowerment, as well as the existing generations, have a framework to work from, have a concept or a theme to work on, have notes to work on. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of incredible videos that reveal the layers and patterns of truth that are out there, from our hidden history to conspiracy to health, and yet it's not accepted because the propaganda is still so in charge. The propaganda machine are the mainstream news agencies, are the magazines, are the pornography and zealots who insist there is only one way through domination and control. We have to give those things away, have to give away the desire, the need, the urge to even listen to them, until finally they have no ratings, until they must divest into other sources to once again gain control over us. And that will be another giveaway and another giveaway. We simply must not accept the illusions that they keep offering us. We must accept the additional abilities that are being offered us in discernment, in understanding, as well as to awaken yourself. It is when we come into that personal power and that awakening shows us all the tools of wisdom we have. The main tool in the toolbox is listening to others. And when others exert force of wisdom, of domination, or control, you can simply say, I do not accept it, and I give it back to you. I give it away to you because I do not need that energy. I have my own self-esteem. I have my own empowerment. And I do not accept a single concept as the only way to go forward. Because when we accept a single concept, we are being led down the primrose path to self-destruction once again. And when we lead ourselves away from that, there will be other leaders that are going vice versa, back and forth, until finally you come into your own empowerment and understand that you have spiritual allies, you have light being allies, as well as beings of the gray. You know? We haven't really talked about those that walk between light and dark, those that have accepted that for this time of change there must be a balance, and that balance is understanding even the forces of light that have been fighting the forces of so long need to take a vacation. Because the more you fight evil, the closer you become to it, and that's just the nature of it. Unfortunately, that's just the raw nature. The more you fight it, the more you're exposed to it. The more you're exposed to it, the more healing you need from it. The more healing you need from it, the more we need leaders to remind us to stay in power, to not trick ourselves, to not be in opposition, to not let ourselves fall into darkness, domination, control, simply because we have battled it for too long. One of those first ways is you tell your story. Quite literally tell your story to yourself, to that whole concept, so we all can come together. And once we understanding that coming together means tolerance, it means connection to the Earth Mother, to the vehicles of spirituality and religion that allow tolerance and do not allow domination. And once we come into that aspect, we'll be on a layer of knowledge, a layer of wisdom where so many people will just get it. The light bulb on their head will turn on. They'll pay attention to the patterns that have been going on and simply say, no, domination, control, you are done here. Your time is over. It is time for you to leave. It is time for you to go to the great ice worlds of the ages passing, to be forgotten. Just as we are erased with amnesia, soon we will have to forget about them and become to a layer of healing that we can all accept, that we can all move forward in. And that's the shaman's path. Life, death, and rebirth, reborning ourselves out of the ashes to allow the future versions of ourselves to exist. So here we are. I keep saying that, here we are. Because each time I reveal a new layer, there's a new pattern, and a new pattern reveals a new layer. So it's an infinite source, an infinite constant, until finally we get to an understanding. It is us that must empower ourselves to empower others. It is us that looks for those that are acting in stealth, in deception. It is us that looks for those that have the passion and fire medicine within inside them to share with the all, and to not share with the few. When we share with the all can have an opportunity to be innocent once again, to recharge their inner child, and be a part of this world with the full creative force that's inside them, instead of a limited creative force.
We've had thousands of societies and civilizations that all they did was watch those stars. And the stars that they watched aren't the same stars we watch today.
Right.
Because reality is perceived through your culture. We're a media-driven culture now. They own our oral traditions.
Right.
Our oral historians were taken away. We still have some now that are out there trying to promote it, but the people that are born into the TV generation, the media generation, that's their oral history.
Right.
And it's not your mother and father as much anymore.
Right.
That's where it has to change. People like me coming out and doing the oral recording of the Akashic record.
Right.
Not in a trance. You can communicate and talk to me. I'm a real person.
They stole the whole world's history.
I know they did.
They destroyed our oral teachers and historians who passed on the special traditions of how to be a special being, to do what it is that I do, to
Yes.
connect into the Akashic record as a grandfather, grandmother of a local clan, tribe, or small nation. And there were hundreds and hundreds of clans that had hundreds and hundreds of record readers.
Yeah.
Because they all did that. And
I
that's
know.
what a lot of what was going on during the Egyptian times, where the 40 years, then the systematic removal of the oral teachers and historians throughout our world, so the industrialized world could step forward, because the
Yes.
industrial world couldn't step forward as long as the oral historians and teachers are telling us about the infinite world inside.
Yes.
We needed to be disconnected from that for that to happen.
Yes.
And that's what did happen. And
I
there was a
know.
massive betrayal on the spiritual world where Dreamtime societies were created in the industrial concept, so people would begin to dream into the industrial world as the oral teachers and historians were being murdered here in this world. And the sacred items and artifacts all throughout the world were robbed and pillaged and put into museums that are sacred
Yeah.
geometry that millions of people go and view every year and get their energy harvested on because their DNA is being activated by seeing all of these objects in a prison.
Yes. Yes.
Okay? Museums are energy prisons.
I know.
Okay?
Yeah.
There'll be a whole new way of honoring our ancestors and their artifacts, and it won't be in these concepts of museums that are trapped in
Definitely.
sacred geometry.
Mm-hmm.
Because our race doesn't know how to create courts of equity, spiritual courts of equity.
And it's been
Because
over.
it's taken away by when our oral traditions were taken away.
And the indigenous tribes were murdered intentionally and replaced with
All the pipe holders too.
and the courts that we presently have.
Because
Maritime.
the pipe was the presence of the court. So when they shared a pipe in court and in council, that pipe was could be psychometry, could be used on it to prove that there was a court then, court with earth, and that would be why the pipe holders were taken. And all the warriors, all the peacemakers, all of them.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the eye.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's the technological eye or the false eye
Correct.
that is controlling things, and that's also on the dollar bill.
Correct. The all-seeing eye. That's from the big institution of Sacred Geometry City, the Sacred Geometry Linguistics, that everything that was a science to limit was created and then instituted in series to step down the consciousness from higher to lower to lower to lower.
And that's when they...
And then the actual pyramid control rooms would be used to step down the actual energy. Propaganda would be brought in, domination would be brought in, that lowers the energy even more, grid lowered again and again and again.
Well,
they don't get snow here.
It's great to have you on the program, Andrew. Bartzis, is that how I pronounce your
last? That is correct.
And I was looking at your bio, and it's quite impressive. And how does that lead to a galactic historian? I guess we can get into that. But you're a healer and a psychic reader for nearly 20 years.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Reiki master.
That bio hasn't been updated in a little bit.
Okay.
I've done a lot of material since that bio went up.
All right.
Let's see. I've been doing this for about 20 years. Started when I was 9 years old. I had an experience. I was at a baseball game. It was bottom of the ninth inning, and at the bottom of the ninth inning, tied score. Our team hit a home run, and all of a sudden, everyone cheered and something came over me, and the information, everyone's past, present, and future lives came inside of my knowingness and my understanding, and it began this long process of understanding that each and every living being is a conscious sentient being inside a DNA skin suit that is technology.
Wow.
And this awareness was my awakening at that young age to what the galactic historian is a person that can identify species through soul family, through origin, through light body DNA, through physical DNA, and track the lines back throughout time, through galaxies and other universes, to show that there are DNA lineages that have been supported for many millions or billions or trillions of years through many different universes, and that when they came through a master experience like Earth, which was part of a system called the Galactic Ascension Machine, where the best of the best came to find the greatest resolve of karma, and they became part of what's called timeline genocides. This is what I learned. This is how I began to experience my life at 9 years old.
Wow.
And as I grew older and older, multiple sets of experience happened to me, both for the positive and for the negative, that kept showing and showing and showing me there was so much more truth than to the lies that we were being told. I remember being taught in my own school that Vietnam was a police action, and I remember arguing with the teacher that call it war. And that teacher says, that's what the books say. Okay?
Yeah. Yep.
That's what the books say. And again, what are the books going to say? Books going to say about 2000, 2008, 2014. You know, a galactic historian is a witness in the neutral perspective, translating the infinite language to the finite language, so we human beings, who are all in our own path to free will, can begin to translate in our own language greater concepts, greater thoughts, greater ways to be free, instead of being limited to this concept that light and dark must always battle.
Right. So this has been going on since you were 9 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it started before that, but that it culminated into that experience. I had many experiences when I was young and challenged my parents. You know, in a Greek family, I grew up in a restaurant business, so many experiences of people seeing me doing very paranormal things.
So how did you deal with that as a youngster, being 9, and as a teenager? How did you deal with all this wealth of, I don't know, information?
Oh, you couldn't tell anyone. I just literally could not tell anyone. Who would you tell?
Right.
I remember being at that young age going, who am I going to tell?
Yeah.
Who am I going to tell? I mean, working in the restaurant, you hear people's stories. You know, everybody talks. You know,
Yeah.
You know, I was groomed to do that in the restaurant business. You just talk to people, and you find their story, and then you realize that they're all in a system of belief. And I knew that. I knew what they were believing in was what they were consciously manifesting. And in that manifestation of life force, it had rules behind it, and those rules were a reality that we were living in. And I realized early, like, what was going on. Like, this is not real. One of these is a dream. And it began this process from a 9 to about 20, 21, whereas I was searching for more and more of what this meant to this individual lifetime, because I'd come to learn by the time I was 11 that I'd planned 10,000 lifetimes to be here. I'd left a cookie crumble of information, and that time at the baseball stadium was planned. Every one of those people were contracted to be there in that city at that time. And it's not hard to put yourself in a matrix of contracted people being in a city in the future if you understand the frequency of the land.
Yeah.
And that's where I was. I was at a baseball stadium at the edge of Lake Erie, and there's people that are within miles and miles, and you have the water there, the stadium. It was its perfect energetic flare. I know there were other people that experienced other things at that moment. You know, everyone in that stadium experienced something.
Yeah.
I know that. My experience was one of the many thousands, and I made it through because it was very, very difficult to be aware of so many different layers of information and then talk about it publicly versus privately. My choice to come out public was to remind people that we are sovereign free will beings, and sometimes we must stand up to people's belief systems in friendship, in gratitude, in respect, because without that, there is no place to break bread. There is no way to make room for something new. And in a society that's giving us the old recycled ideas over and over again, they've recycled it to the point that they've recycled it and given us GMO. They've given us contracts on our when we're born, your birth certificates, your bonds. For people that are in the law and sovereignty on the law side, your citizenship. It's also part of your soul. They are all interlinked, and to think that our reality is not interlinked is to deny the most basic law of quantum physics, consciousness entanglement.
Yeah. Consciousness entanglement. What is that?
Well, when an observer does a quantum experiment and wants to observe two particles interacting, it is now known that the observer influences the reaction of the quantum particles.
Oh, yeah, okay, right. That was some physics conference where they came about that idea. I think in the 20s.
Max Planck in the 1960s and 70s.
Oh, 60s and 70s, okay.
Consciousness and energy depict the nature of reality,
right.
In which he did the actual experiments and proved that the observer, even if somebody was observing 1 year later, still influenced the results.
Wow.
So he came up with this concept: consciousness and energy depict the nature of reality. Well, literally, our consciousness manifests and decides what we observe, what we see, what we manifest. If a person walks into a casino and walks right up, picks up the dice, rolls perfect sixes, takes his money and walks out, that person has enough confirmation in themselves to consciously manifest that. And in gambling scenarios, we see this all the time. But we also see the other side where many failures happen because it requires so much conscious energy to be able to do that in a reality that has a high layer of resistance.
Yeah.
This is where we come to the understanding of time. What is it?
A man-made construct.
Exactly. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast.
Yes.
So there's 3 hours difference.
Right.
Well, if we just went by the lunar alignment, we would both know what time it is locally. We don't need these complicated systems of time. Yeah. And they're created that way to get people lost.
Right.
So back to discernment. I think in my current life, and I think many others, the media has done a great job of giving the truth, which is their job, but the agendas of the people presenting the truth are not always consistent. So some media is very honest, their intentions very honest, could be co-opted, where other media is very deliberately trying to steer you in one direction. The same in the New Age movement, the same through all the religions, and I think there's probably a bias that said if it's an Eastern religion, it must be obviously better than a Western religion, because Eastern is so old. But trying to navigate that and trying to figure out, so what is truth and how do I reach that state of alignment is a big challenge. Big challenge.
I don't know what to ask you next. It's it's the rabbit hole is getting.
Is it the red pill or the blue pill? Why don't you just ask some standard questions? What's going on in history? Like, it doesn't matter what era of history it's in.
Sure. What about the time right now? What's going on right now?
Do you pay attention to propaganda news?
No.
No? Well, what they're chitter-chattering on, what propaganda is talking about is war in Syria, ISIS, ISIS, which is they're trying to insert this more programming into you. As I was saying earlier, we're a species that has generational programming. It has historical programming to it. The victors have written our history for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So how do we know truth? Well, you start in your heart, and you put that bullshit meter on. And everyone's got a different tuning to that bullshit meter, or the tuning to their own truth, or a resonant frequency that says that this is a layer of truth that I can begin to look into my beliefs with. And this is a belief system time where it's the belief system trains are all crashing throughout our historical falseness. And what is belief going to learn? Everyone's right. This consciousness and energy depict the nature of reality. The quantum entanglement has been proven over and over again. We are a shared reality, but we aren't living in separation. We are living in a unity right now. We just haven't finished this last moment of reverse engineering our paradox, which starts at our history of why we're here now. Why this one species that's on this planet with 7,300,000,000 human beings and another 50 billion beings living on this world we haven't met yet. That's what's coming to us. So what's going on now? Propaganda is saying nothing. Propaganda is saying Iran, ISIS. Propaganda is saying banking. Propaganda is saying Nasera. Propaganda is saying volcanoes, destruction. It's saying fear, 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 because it wants you to create fear.
Yeah.
And all those people that are saying not fear, believe in yourself, start a sovereign movement, grow a garden, live in nature, those are the ones that are thriving now. And those are the ones that are going to have the greatest voice because their truth is connected into nature. And it's the nature of truth to be natural and not forced.
That's true.
And so that explains the various metaphors and stories about the various falls and the water, the destruction by water, fire, blah, blah, blah.
And that destruction is post-traumatic stress on your soul.
Oh, yes.
PTSD on your soul. So when they start mass propaganding the destruction of Atlanta, the destruction, the flood, Noah's flood, blah, 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 it's to make you back into that soul fear that you had because you were here during a destruction, so that you would create that destruction.
Right, right. Okay.
But what they can do is propagate propaganda that makes a certain section of people so fearful that they can create a temporary destruction in their area.
Right.
A volcano, an earthquake. Though I am in this state of understanding that no big destructions will happen unless you create it in your local reality because of mass propaganda and fear, carpet bombing that area.
Mm-hmm. So what we might be seeing from now forward, since 2014 is kind of the drop dead date.
Well, this can be extended out 20 years if they want.
Oh, okay.
The quarantine grid is very enforced now. There are vessels in our atmosphere that are taking consciousness and reinvesting it into the earth, slowly raising the energies of earth, like trickle charging a battery.
Okay.
If they raise it too fast, there'll be people on this planet who simply can't exist here when fade out.
Okay.
And they don't want that to happen. They want the graduating classes.
Right.
So the quarantine is well in effect. When I say this can be extended out 20 years, it's all about enough consciousness here to accept the first two stages of the Dreamtime events that we have that lead into the harder parts of consciousness to accept, where you could have an entire city, you know, in a brief second of unity, no time, completely go, what's happening, and ascend.
No and yes. Well, you got to understand, June 2011, we were brought onto a single timeline, and there's going to be a lot of people who have a tough time with this. What it was is there's been time wars that have been going on here for a very long time, and the whole purpose of the time wars is these multidimensional beings are trying to influence the theme of our awakening. So they brought propaganda, Planet X, Nibiru, or any of that. We are creator beings, and if they bring a high amount of propaganda, we will believe it and create that. And the whole point of the awakening is to claim your free will separate of the incarnation grid and allow yourself to understand Earth's original purpose. So the whole walk-in, all of that is understanding that when you take something out and replace it with something, it has to still function with all those spirit contracts that walk-in entity that they came into. And many of these entities are time travelers. And when they unified the timeline into a single stream, all the tangent streams ended. But since so many of us were on multiple timelines and never knew it, when we go to sleep, we dream ourselves into those other timelines. It's like a person who's had an arm cut off and has ghost limb syndrome. And we have to stop ourselves from creating these fake timelines again. And that's where we're at. So the neutral beings that are walk-ins are keeping the timeline a single timeline, so we live long enough to accept that, you know, there's none of these extra timelines.
The timeline travelers, the people that have come here to unify the timeline, that's a very significant thing.
Oh, yeah. Timeline, just to even begin the concept, you have to understand the multidimensional being concept. Because what they do is they have multiple versions of themselves spread out through a linear timeline, and then they brought in technology so different pieces, parts of themselves can create tangent timelines, and then they could literally incarnate other parts of themselves in other parts of the timeline, and then bring soul family with them that are sleeper agents. So the whole purpose is to create propaganda that would manifest deep in the future. And the light guys are always trying to counter the timeline movement, cut this other stuff out. So it's like trying to play a multi-dimensional game of chess 200,000 moves ahead of time. And the only way you can do it is by planning your actual soul's lifetime 10,000 or 100,000 lifetimes in advance. And that's what I did. I planned my lifetime since for the last 52 million years so I could be here now.
So this is the game that the Archontic beings enjoy playing, this massively complex interdimensional chess game. That's fun for them?
Yep. I call them the intergalactic mafia because they're trading our DNA so that they can recreate the galactic ascension machine somewhere else. It's always been the prize to get Earth and then to make a bunch of other drama planets and make a galactic ascension machine somewhere else. Because what these beings are doing is literally challenging Prime Creator to say, no, we're the new guys on the block and we are going to be the Prime Creators in this galaxy and we're going to beat you. So there'll be two separate Prime Creators from the galaxy. That's their whole purpose now.
And they're not going to succeed? Is that what you're saying?
They've already failed.
The management. Okay.
They already failed.
Yep.
But the thing is, we have to remove them because they're soul family. It's like when you got a rotten member of your family, you love them, but you can't live with them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to eliminate our contracts with them. And that's what reclaiming your free will during this time of empowerment is about. Anything that inserts fine print must go.
Fascinating concept. So how do you reclaim your free will?
First of all, it requires going inside and healing parts of yourself. And Michael and Peter talk about that frequently. You know, you have to be willing to look at yourself and to identify that there are parts of yourself that no longer apply to the adult you. And you have to realize, well, the type of damage that your innocent inner child did that shaped your life, as well as the good and the bad, and I commonly call this talking to the fire. I'm a fire shaman and a dream interpreter. When I function in the dream world, I'm in the North Pole and the South Pole at the same time. The North Pole is literally where the dream worlds exist, and the South Pole is where the astral world exists, where the new souls that are coming in here to plan their incarnation, they exist in the South Pole, and then they live through us vicariously to experience what the matrix world is like so that they can figure out what soul family they want to be in. Reclaiming your free will is about literally understanding the matrix is trying to define you through propaganda of what type of co-creating manifestor spirit you're going to be, and you must disconnect from that through meditation, through self-healing, through ascended mastery courses, and begin the process of unplugging from this muddy world until you understand that this world has several layers layered on top of it and layered below it, and that your perception is the key to understanding the matrix as what is the defining propaganda of all these multidimensional beings that takes place between 2011 and 2014.
Now, the propaganda is being perpetuated at ground
By
level
us.
in 3D reality by the media machine which drives our thought.
Yep.
Particularly in the Western world. What about the Eastern world, where the Western media is not so prevalent?
Well, it's controlled by a different media source, and it uses their culture against them. Example, in China, they're extremely big on ancestor spirits, but if you watch Chinese TV, they actually degrade the ancestor spirit concept so that people don't adhere to it anymore. And there's a huge following of Christianity in China that was brought there on purpose so that would separate them from their ancestor spirits.
And they do that on all the major media like Facebook and all the different social media sites. And that's all pretty much run by artificial intelligence.
And teams of remote influencers.
Okay, so Google and all the major...
Well, the actual people in Google, no, they're separate. These are the franchises that I spoke about in an earlier episode.
Right.
They have access to the raw data that is collected on us from all those social networking data mining sites.
Oh.
That information is then fed into an artificial intelligence that makes a massive computation and makes a predictive model for each individual and then the whole and total. And the remote influencers look at this data and process the data and then begin to target lineages of people through the internet who have an ability to reach far.
Mm.
So how does a person discern truth when there are just multiple sources, the internet, we're all saying, I'm true, I'm true, I'm true.
Mm-hmm.
That's overwhelming.
It's a smorgasbord.
Yeah, it's a huge buffet.
And everyone thinks they're the only truth.
I've heard that before, the one-way thing.
Okay. That is the first discernment level. Is it one way? The world isn't one way. It's an infinite amount of ways.
So that's the first checklist.
That's
if
the
someone
first
says that I have the truth, you go, okay, obviously you don't. Move on, next.
Mm-hmm. Well, from the galactic historian perspective, I experience that all the time. That's why I speak the way that I do and project the energy that I do, because I know inside that human body you have a set of receptors that are built into your DNA to identify truth from the Akashic record linked to the accursed Akashic mind.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't have the user manual to pay attention to it. And there are people that have figured out parts of the user manual that are light workers, that are healers, that are dream
Mm-hmm.
protectors. And I know there's enough out there that they can receive the message and then translate it to a message that's a scale down which will be passed on. That's why it has to be to the highest energy.
So what you're saying is even though it is very complex, it's a very complex game, that there are people that have discerned the truth and are disseminating that very truthfully.
And broadcasting it omnidirectional through their field.
Just by being in their presence.
Correct.
And that it may not be one person broadcasting 100% of the truth, but a collection of people together
Mm-hmm.
create an overlay that provides that truth that you are getting a sense.
Correct.
And that when you're within a community of people that are in their truth, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
that it creates a vibration that allows you to start hearing or feeling
Exactly.
and sensing that something feels right.
Mm-hmm.
The event represents us going into a rapidly ascending, going into a spot of less dense space, and the Earth control grid quite literally won't be able to catch up with the rapid change of energy. Our sacred geometry grid planet will rapidly energize, which will give us more unified dream time. Last week I described how the global Dreamtime Society evolves and how we're herded into cities for 6,800 separate local realities. All of those local realities will be severed from the main control system because the main control system is not in full control. And the event will unfold multidimensionally between the 6,800 separate Dreamtime societies, and each one will experience local Dreamtime realities and unified Dreamtime realities, like having a dream inside a dream. And this will last for several days. People will wake up in the dream while other people are still living in the dream in multiple realities. And then when the event ends, everybody's going to be like, what the hell? That's the mechanics behind it. The local realities propaganda is what's trying to influence the way the outcome of the event is. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, all about propaganda and the use of the technology to enforce propaganda so that when we go through our awakening through global dream time, we have a theme that they can enforce and predict.
Okay, so they're trying to turn it into a fear event like 3 Days of Darkness.
Yep.
How would it actually play out, do you think, as far as, in that period of time? I presume will everything technological be still functioning as we see it in terms of the media and our technology by which we live, the energy delivery systems, the grid? Are they all going to stay online, or are we actually going to have... Go ahead.
They'll all stay online. Again, this is going to be a dream time event. If you're in a dream, is the technology really working in a dream if you're driving a car?
Mm-hmm. Nope.
Okay? You're projecting it to. Mm-hmm. And many of the asleep people will still project the technology to work because they're creating their local reality. And we live in sacred geometry cities that have very strong programming to enforce local reality. And they were created that way knowing that the event time would come where we went through this part of space and where, the back end of Earth that's on the lowest part of the consciousness is suddenly going to come to a much more higher energy, less dense part of space. And naturally the grid of Earth is going to rapidly increase energy, and it's going to raise from a third dimensional to a fourth dimensional energetic planet. And that means forces of domination and control are going to have a very, very hard time existing here because their vibration is going to be so different. It's like going to be having, them being bombarded by sound waves that are very painful to them. Therefore, they need technology that can rapidly lower the vibration of Earth while it's going through this space of less dense and high energy space. Example, CERN's secondary effect is to do that, is to create a shield around Earth so that as it travels through this less dense part of space, they can keep the energy of the Earth grid low.
It sounds like we're basically going to go through a pocket of space that's particularly light.
It's quite large, though. It's really a large space. Like, we were in a very dense part of space for the last 28,000 years, and this next part of space that we're going to go through is like 68,000 years.
Okay, so it's really a very big pocket, and it's a permanent effect you're talking about, not just...
Correct.
So we're actually in the gradated piece of space between those two regions. So
yes, quite literally.
It's the density of the space is lightening down. Now, that lesser density is if the planets are heating up, is it because there's more energy reaching us from the sun simply because there's nothing, or there's less matter between us and the sun?
Correct. And the galactic central sun has been bombarding this solar system with consciousness-raising energy from the prime creator.
Okay, so we're getting extra help from the central sun.
Correct.
In this. The effects of this initial burst, permanent, semi-permanent, or simply the psychological effects rolling on? Because it sounds like we're going to get an initial hit that's quite intense.
Yep. It'll be psychological, and the whole purpose is to break the programming.
So this is breaking
break the hypnosis.
breaking us out of that hypnotic control.
Yep.
And I presume that after that particular point in time, it's really up to us, the collective, to work out what to do next.
Correct.
Hence the propaganda.
Yep.
Spin doctrine.
Yep, and the fact that once we're firmly in this lighter part of space, the DNA codes in people will be activated. This is the DNA activation many of the New Agers talk about it. But it's going to function in a different way. You're literally going to get new parts of your DNA that turn on, that function in this lighter part of the space very differently, and therefore your crown chakra will be much more interactive with the Earth grid as well as the planetary grid in our solar system. That's commonly called astrology. So people will be much more in tune with the positions of the other planets in our solar system.
Well, they'll just be energetically connected, which is where Michael and Peter come in sharing, the means by which you actually use that technology.
Yep.
Indeed. Okay. So I mean, obviously, there's no predicting the exact time of this event. We spoke last week after the show about markers, things that stood out as being indicators that the event was close by. Can you speak about those at all?
Yes. When Earth itself, the sentience of Earth, actually asserts enough of its will through the control system to bring in more of the energies of the galactic central sun, what'll happen is imagine the Earth with a layer of grids over it, and one spark in the North Pole, one spark in the South Pole, and then a bunch of other sparks all over the world, and then all of a sudden one chakra opens up and there's a burst of energy, and then a bunch of other sparks all over the world, and another chakra opens up. This will create a pattern, and all those sparks, even though seemingly chaotic, are ultimately meant to scramble the world grid so that the control systems have to retune themselves, and it could take several days. And then at that point, when the control systems are no longer in effect, Earth can be a part of the less dense part of space, and poof, it's there. All of a sudden, it's not being held back by the control grid and the lack of consciousness here, and these little sparks of light all over the grid confuse the control system enough that the consciousness of Earth will suddenly become part of the new cosine wave of this new place in space as part of the solar system.
Okay, and the little sparks are human consciousness fully activated?
No, not really. They're the actual Earth grid. Let's say you have ley lines that intersect. Mm-hmm. Ley lines can be a couple feet off the ground to a couple miles off the ground. Mm-hmm. These will be the ley line grids that are 2 to 3 miles above the ground.
Okay, so they'll really go into a high energy mode, will they?
Right, and you will see the ley lines during that point in time.
Okay, so at ground level and in the sky.
Correct. Well, you'll see them in the sky first. The ground level won't go until we've spent about a full month into this lighter spot of space.
So you start to see them as like a spider-like grid in the sky?
Correct.
That'll be interesting. That'll be very interesting. Okay, and what about sociologically? What sort of markers will we see in terms of what's happening in our society?
Well, as soon as people get the rest of their lighter density DNA activated, much more psychic talents will be available. People will just inherently recognize the TV as programming and turn it off, or begin to complain. Because there'll be asleep people that are awake and don't really know they're awake. And it'll be many weeks before they realize that they're awake. And that's the social change. The awake people who suddenly become even more awake become hypersensitive to technology and the unshielded broadcasting, and are just going to filter themselves into natural Earth energy places. And I call this the homing beacon, because all of us are getting ready for a migration to leave this world, to stay on this world, or for the new migration to come in. I describe it like ducks that go south for the winter. Mm-hmm. People are just going to be flocking to energetic places.
That's fascinating. And the effects, on things like the financial system, I presume that will start to become extremely unhappy with the financial system to the point of taking action.
Yes, people recognize that it's a house of cards, a casino with people in control of the government and the organizations that gets nothing. Here's another example. In August, all of the statute of limitations on the 2008 banking scandal come to an end here. Quite literally. That means no one can be arrested. As of right now, not a single banker has ever been charged or taken to jail for anything that happened in 2008.
Yeah, well, that's obviously not satisfactory. So I presume you'll see a lot of resistance to the financial system, people on the streets, etc.
Right.
Anything else?
A cooperative of uncooperative people.
I like that. That's a good term. Anything else that stands out as being worth mentioning to look out for? I guess yeah, go ahead. Is this going to be?
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
The impression that a lot of us have is that the event is kind of a thing that just arrives one day, but you're describing more of something that kind of builds up to a peak.
Well, it all happens in the dream time where you don't know if you're awake or asleep. And that happens on a global level. So imagine everybody on a global level all dreaming 62 days that in your dream, but when you wake up from the dream world, only 6 hours have passed. But again, there will be people that are awake that experience the event awake but are still in a dream. It's like daydreaming, you know. You ever daydreamed and all of a sudden you lose an hour?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Same thing.
It's going to be pretty weird in some ways, by the sound of it.
Yep.
Quite strange. Okay. Social change, Earth changes. Any particular aspects of physical events on Earth during this period of time? Obviously, if we're shifted energetics, it's going to affect the environment. There's been a lot of fear porn around, you know, massive earthquakes, etc. Just fear porn, or is there actually going to be some Earth changes?
There is going to be no significant Earth changes that cause massive amounts of die-off. If it is, it's because your local reality believed the propaganda and manifested it.
Okay. Things like, coastal flooding is something that's being put forward as being, imminent by certain sources of information. That's just a local reality? That's just a manipulation?
It's a manipulation that's trying to get people to believe propaganda and spread it globally so that multiple local realities have enough empowered people in them empowering that negative concept.
So this is a case of dumping information into the consciousness in local areas to actually force those people to manifest the reality that's being foisted upon them.
That's correct.
It's a trick.
It's a trick.
And I presume at some point in this process, humanity begins to learn that it's actually projecting this reality.
It is projecting. The propaganda is the mouthpiece of projection. Mm-hmm. Again, this has been a predictive model in the timeline for 52 million years. They're looking at the DNA as a predictive model. They're looking at the consciousness as a predictive model based off of a lower level, we'll use the word voltage. Earth is meant to be a super high voltage planet, but we're running on like 7 volts right now. And we're going to be going into a part of space that functions on 30 volts. And there needs to be technology that limits people from functioning at 30 volts.
Now, once humanity realizes that it can actually, manifest its own reality, do you see there being a certain amount of confusion around that period of time?
Well, yeah, because we're not going to be right now. We're as a global consciousness, we create a global concept. We create this global concept. We do. The sun goes down, the sun goes up. People go to work. They do all those things, and we create that reality. And we've been creating that reality since the Industrial Revolution. Mm-hmm. When the event comes in, there's going to be multiple sub-realities within that overall reality. And that is representative of the fact that they herded us into sacred geometry cities that are meant to be massive dream catchers. So So that was on purpose because they knew what the event would do, and they wanted to separate us into multiple realities so that they can bombard one sub-reality with propaganda and satellitic energy so that it would spread to other local realities.
What sort of, excuse me, what sort of goal do you think they have in mind for? I mean, if they get control of the situation on the other side, which I actually don't think they will, but what do you think their objective is? You know, basically to completely turn us into a slave society, or just a different version of this one?
No, this is the slick part. Mm-hmm. They actually want us to raise vibration, but they want to change the theme of our total free will. They want us to have only 50% of our free will. That means they have to invest less into us to control, and then suddenly Earth itself, the species here, can't complete its migration pattern. They can bring more souls into Earth, increase its actual people, and then bring space-based technologies where they can go out and start conquering other planets.
Aha. So the game is to create a larger scale war machine.
Yep.
Well, I'm not having any of that.
Me neither.
Any listeners out there that want to go down that path? I don't think so. And that's really a very important point. So their overall objective here is to basically create a completely controlled planet of quite advanced beings who are quite willing to jump on pieces of technology and go out and spread this problem elsewhere.
Correct. And then create galactic ascension machine style solar systems in other places and spread drama. And as I said, their goal is to become the new creators of this galaxy. So you have a new prime creator in a prime creation already.
Okay, it's a takeover.
Yep.
Quite simply a takeover. Well, I'm not having any of that. I'm far more interested in the model that we spoke of right at the start, where this world is turned into a world of healers and teachers that go out amongst the stars and spread peace.
That's what I'm here for. Spread peace, break bread, come together in communion and union.
It seems like if one were to predict what was coming, and of course we can't, but if one were to try, it seems like there could be a lot of comical events that will be exposed through the media, and then also there will
The
be...
media will be a big joke.
Yeah. How do you see that unraveling?
Let me find the words for it.
Okay.
There will come a time where there'll be enough people marching that members of Congress will not be in the country. At that point, the corporate offices will have people camped out in front of them, and those people will leave the country. And the news media on the local level report it, and the national level won't. And that will be the main media issue, the local units that are saying, no, I'm going to give you the middle finger, I'm going to report the truth. And then the national units using their corporate powers to start firing people. Okay, so there will be independent news agencies that start their own internet news agency for free to get the truth out. Bob Smith of Channel 7 News, who's now on Channel Z News on YouTube, continuing his show with the same production staff that said, no, we're not going to be a part of this lie.
And that's going to be an interesting process, and that will definitely hit the news. So the news will
be a multi-dimensional game of whack-a-mole. This one comes up, no whack. This one comes up, whack. This one comes up, whack. 15 come up, oh, where do I hit first?
Sounds like fun. So we will see in short order, within my lifetime, for sure, the collapse of the control of the media.
Correct.
The controls by the church.
The church will be spectacular.
Oh, yes.
They hold a lot of cards. And think of it as a game of poker. Okay. You got to show your... Ooh, we got a friendly moth coming through.
Hello.
It's a multi-dimensional moth.
Right. It's blessing us. Healing.
Think of it a game of 7-card Texas Hold'em poker. And it's everyone's got to show their hands. Or there's 1,000 people at the table. The first guy to show his hands shows tens and jacks.
Okay.
Pretty good. So the 999 other people out there that are there have to show their cards too and beat that.
Oh my God. And then once the first domino falls, it'll be like V for Vendetta.
So it doesn't require a college degree. It doesn't require someone to be highly intelligent in the sense of a high IQ.
Nope.
It just requires someone using common sense in terms of when a situation occurs, are they aware of how they feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
And are they aware of what they chose to do?
Mm-hmm.
Were they aware of the consequence? And then are they willing to repeat that consequence on a regular basis or choose a different action if that consequence gives them a negative outcome?
Exactly.
And so it's kind of like Groundhog Day.
Yep.
And after a while, you're like, I'd really like to date that girl, and I keep pissing her off, and so I don't want to stop. I want to stop stepping into that puddle, and so you go take a little bit off to that. Okay. So discernment is not complicated. It just requires a practice, a daily practice.
Slowing information down. The world moves really fast.
Right.
Once you slow it down, that's another layer to discernment. Is knowing when to slow it down, because there's things hidden in it of misunderstanding. They can easily be misunderstood because the data's moving so fast.
And so as you're running, if you think that you have to go fast, then you're actually missing, which is right here, you've gone past it. And
Exactly.
so actually the people that speak slowly, I found, sometimes are the most aware. And that the people who speak fast, and myself included, sometimes you overshoot.
Correct.
And so actually it's not a game of intellect, it's a game of awareness.
Absolutely. It's always awareness and consciousness.
Yeah.
Now, it always stems down to that for the value in this universe.
So every human being has that ability
Absolutely.
to discern and become conscious, no
And
matter
sovereign.
and sovereign, no matter where they are in the scheme, whether you're penniless or you're homeless,
Exactly.
or you're a very smart person in a very important job, or you're a politician. We all have the same path,
Correct.
and there's nothing easier or harder except for dealing with the perceived fear that if I really look at myself and who I am and what I've done, whether I'm able to accept that, and then the commitment, which is your choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you want to go forward, to act on and do something different.
Exactly.
And free will says you can do the same thing you want in infinity
Mm-hmm.
until you're ready to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
And that's okay too.
And you can steal as often as you want, and you can do those things, but there'll be a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, when you're done and you realize that the wealth is within inside, then you can choose something different, and you've lost nothing, but
Gained everything.
Gained everything, exactly. So no one's lost anything. People in prison, people have done bad things. The moment of truth is when you realize, okay, that wasn't such a good idea, but I learned so much.
Mm-hmm. Retrospection is one of the greatest human tools.
So no matter my choices, I become wealthy.
Absolutely.
Just choose.